Today being Children's Sunday, closer to November 14th when we normally celebrate our Children's Day. Since the kids also join us in our Sunday service, it's important that we bring home the point what it feels like to be a child, or what the scriptures emphasize on being childlike. Similar to what the kids experienced in the morning, where they had this discussion that I am putting up a stall, and then this competition, I am putting up a stall. Imagine this scene back in Jesus' day. His disciples, 12 of them, or we do not know how many of them, they were walking along with Jesus. Sometimes when we talk in our low voice, thinking that the other person should not hear, or under the breath we keep murmuring something to our fellow person. In the same manner, these disciples were walking with Jesus and they're whispering among themselves, debating a question. They were too embarrassed to ask Jesus. And Jesus hears that. It's funny how Jesus hears all the time. He knows sometimes what you even think. Not just hearing, but even in your thought, if you just think something, Jesus knows what you're thinking. And the question that they were all asking themselves, all these disciples, the 12, who is the greatest in the kingdom? Who is the greatest in the kingdom? And sometimes if the kids have this chat, I got first rank, and the other child is thinking, they have to say, my little one is too creative in that section. If the older one comes home and says, I got second rank, my younger one thinks I have to give a rank too. So she says, I got third rank. Who gets the most spiritual influence among the disciples? That's their thought. That's what they were whispering to themselves. And Jesus hears, and then he makes a point, an illustration out of that time, and it's shocking to them. He calls a little child, he puts him in the middle of that group, and this little child has no credibility in terms of he doesn't have experience, he doesn't have a title, he doesn't have any authority. He brings this little child into that center of the group, and he says to the 12 grown men who were standing there debating among themselves who is the greatest, he says, unless you turn and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Unless you turn, not just become, you turn and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. It's found in Matthew chapter 18, verse 3. He's not answering the question, who will become great? He's not answering the question, not that you won't lead anybody. He in fact goes on to say, you will never enter the kingdom. And suddenly everything becomes quiet over there. Because Jesus isn't saying we all must become childish, immature, irresponsible, naive. No. He's saying we must become childlike, humble, trusting, open-hearted, and quick to obey. That's what he's calling us to. So I'd like to take us on a journey with 4 different examples that you would see across the scriptures, revealing what each child brings home a point of the quality that Jesus is talking about. The first one you would find in 2 Kings chapter 5. You don't have to open your Bible. It's a story you can read after you go home. 2 Kings chapter 5. And he says, there's a story about a young girl who is captured by an army which comes. In those days, there were kingdoms. They were fighting between kings. And this commander of the army comes to this nation and they destroy and then they capture this little young girl. So they take her to their country, and it's in that country they now begin this divide and assign role. So they take this young girl and say, oh, this girl goes to serve in this so and so's house. So this girl gets to serve in the commander of that army's house. His name is Naaman. You would find that in 2 Kings chapter 5. Naaman is a man of power. He's a man of rank. He has a stature. He's a guy who can command and who has authority. And this little young girl, we do not know what's her age, but in that youth, she is robbed of her freedom and she is kept as a servant girl in that house. But listen to what she says, being in that house. If only my master would go to the prophet in Samaria, he would be healed. Number one, this young girl is a captive and is a servant in a house. She's not sitting there thinking, what is become of my life? All the freedom that I used to enjoy back home, it's gone. She's observing every single thing that's happening in the house. And she looks at her master, Naaman. And Naaman, because he doesn't live in Israel, he's not an outcast yet. But he has something called leprosy, a skin disease. A skin disease in Israel is untouchable. But in the country, in the country that he's living, he's a commander of the army. Right? But still, there's this little heart's cry in Naaman that someone would heal me, or I would be healed of this leprosy that I have. And this little girl who's a captive in that house is looking at her master and saying, if only my master would go to the prophet in Samaria. Imagine it like this. If you are struggling in life, let's say you have depression or you have something that needs to be healed, or you're in a lot of debt, and you come to church and one of these kids come walk up to you and say, if you can only go to this person and they pray over you and you'll be healed or you'll be delivered or whatever that is, how would you feel? How would you feel? What's your age? What are you talking? This little girl has no clue. In the sense, this little girl probably has never seen prophet that she's talking about. She's never been there, or probably she's never experienced what this prophet can do. Probably she heard what this prophet has done. And she believes him so much. In her heart, she thinks, if my master can go there, he'll be healed. There's no fear, there's no hesitation. There's simple, courageous faith that she is portraying there. When it comes to compassion, children don't overthink. They just show. Compassion just flows out of them. They don't calculate risk before caring. What would I have to go through if I say something? What would I have to experience? What would they think of me if I say it like this? When they believe God can do something, they say it. There's no hesitation. They just say it. Her childlike courage becomes the spark for Naaman's miracle. What she believed, what she said, became a miracle that turned around for Naaman. You would find in 1 Samuel chapter 3 where Hannah prays for a child and the child is born, a son is born, his name is Samuel, and you would see Samuel in chapter 3 where he's placed by his mother in the temple of God. Samuel is living there as a child. His routine is that he has to sleep there, eat there, wake up, and has no clue who God is or what he does. But he has to now train himself through the prophet who is before him. The prophet will teach him. So he's sleeping one day in his room, or wherever that is, in the temple. And as he's sleeping in that silence in the night, there's a voice that calls a name, his name, Samuel. And Samuel hears it. So what does the child do? Normally, the child gets up, goes to the adult who is in the house, and asks, "Did you call me?" And Eli, the prophet who is sleeping, he says, "No, I didn't call you. Just go back and sleep." It happens 3 times. The second time when he goes and he asks Eli, or the prophet who's the adult there, what the prophet says is, "Do this as I say." When you hear the voice again, Samuel, if somebody calls you again, "Samuel, I want you to do this." And what does it say? "Speak, Lord, your servant is hearing." If somebody tells you, "Speak, Lord, your servant is hearing," if you're going through a troublesome situation in your life, you will try every word that is told to you. Okay, if this doesn't work, let me try this thing that they told me. If this doesn't work, let me try this thing that they told me. But at certain point, you come to this conclusion that, does this really work? Is it theologically correct? Is this what my forefathers did? What does Samuel do? "Speak, Lord, your servant is hearing." He goes back to sleep. He gets to hear the voice again, "Samuel." He gets up and says, "Speak, Lord, your servant is hearing." He doesn't recognize the voice. He has no clue who that is who's speaking to him. He just follows the instruction that's given by the adult over there. But he does what children normally do, their best, which is to answer. They respond. When the second time he responds with the posture which Jesus one day would teach his disciples, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." Children don't need full understanding before responding. They don't have to figure out all that they need to before they say yes. Their trust comes first more than their logic. Samuel's entire prophetic destiny begins with this childlike readiness. There's a point in time where Samuel actually prays for King Saul. This little child Samuel, who grew up now, becomes a prophet in Israel, and he begins to pray for King Saul that God would relieve him from the misery that he's going through. God would keep him as a king. And then God comes down and says, "No, I have already rejected him. Go and appoint the person that I'm going to show." What does Samuel do? He learned in his childhood what he needs to do: obey, trust. So he gets up from praying to God about Saul, goes and anoints David as a king. You would move on to 2 Kings chapter 22, verse up to 23. You would see a king called Josiah. Now, I don't know how many of you have 8-year-olds, but Josiah became a king. It's okay, let the kids play, have fun. Josiah was 8 years old when he became a king, when he was appointed a king. His parents die and everybody in his family dies, only he is left, so they appoint him as a king. Imagine the weight, the palace that he lives, the responsibility that he has to carry by himself. Josiah doesn't grow proud, right? He grows sensitive as he grows older. At the age of 16, the Bible records that Josiah begins to seek God. At the age of 16. If you're 16 and sitting here, This is for you. A king who's appointed at the age of 8 now becomes 16 years old and he seeks God. Listen to what happens when he turns 20. When he turns 20, he begins to tear down the idols that have been created in his land, in the country that he is a king of. So he begins going around and sees people worshipping to something else, not the God that he knows. So he goes and tears that down. He's a king. He's been so sensitive to hear the voice of God, and he captures it. By the age of 20, he's so jealous for God that he runs around making sure that every single person worships the God that he knows. And as he grows older, there's this passage which says, when the book of the law, which is probably what Moses has written about all the laws that God has instructed the children of Israel to follow, when this book was read before Josiah, being a king, being in that authority, you know what he does? He tears his clothes and weeps. Why? This law talks to him about the sin that his country is in, about the misery that his country is in. It opens up his eyes to see what his kingdom is going through. And he feels so bad, he tears his clothes. Can anybody, in their sound mind, when they hear the voice of God, or when God convicts you, have you ever tried tearing your clothes? You wouldn't. And this is a king who does it. He's doing it for his entire nation. You see, a child's heart is easily moved. And Josiah carries the same tenderness before God almost all through his life. So what he has learned growing up. Childlike humility is not weakness. Please understand, childlike humility is not weakness. It is responsiveness that we have. And you move on to Jesus' time in John chapter 6, or you would see this in all the Gospels almost. There's this feeding of the 5,000. It's a story that's told in all kids' church or Sunday schools as well, right? Jesus is sitting there, he's teaching a lot of people, thousands of people, and then Jesus tells his disciples, and you would find this narrative so interesting in all these different Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. As you read, you would find bits and pieces which throw more light into this story. Jesus turns to Andrew and says, "Can you please go feed these people?" And he's not asking him to feed 2 people, 10 people, 20 people, or 100 people. By the time you come to the end of the story, you find that there are 5,000 men and then more, women and children, all of that. So Jesus is looking at his disciple and he says, "Can you please feed these people?" I found it very interesting when I read these passages, the questions that these disciples asked, and obviously that's the same way that we adults almost all the time respond to anybody who asks us to do the unimaginable, right? Philip. Jesus soon saw a huge crowd. John chapter 6, verse 5. Jesus soon saw a huge crowd of people coming to look for him. Turning to Philip, he asked, "Where can we buy bread to feed all these people?" He was testing Philip, for he already knew what he was going to do. And listen to what Philip answers. Philip replied, "Even if we worked for months, we wouldn't have enough money to feed them." Go and do this. God has laid some dream on your heart. And then you come to God and say, "Even if I did all this, I don't think I would have achieved anything. Even if you send 10 people, it's not possible, Jesus. Even if you send enough resources." So we have this logic that keeps running in our head. Let me try and calculate, Jesus. There are 5,000, 6,000 people. Okay, approximately 6,000. If I work, my annual salary is this. And this is not sufficient for Christmas fundraiser, Jesus. They're showing 12 lakhs. I am selling bands, wristbands, which are 25 rupees each. How much will I raise, Jesus? Maybe 300 rupees? But what is 300 to 12 lakhs? That's how we question. Philip is asking these questions too. Then Andrew, Simon's Peter brother, spoke up. There's a young boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. There's a solution, but not enough. So the question that he asks is, but what good is that with this huge crowd? What good is it? You're talking about 7,000 people and you have 5 loaves and 2 fish. Let the boy eat that meal. Right? What does the boy do? I don't know if he was coerced into doing it, if he was forced into doing it, or if somebody sweet talked him to doing it. Right? If you're a sweet talker, what would you say to the boy? You could go to the boy and say, hey, listen. Can I please grab this lunch of yours? I know they're delicious. Your mom gave them. You're going to eat them in a while. But I know Jesus is saying he can feed these people with just these 5 loaves and 2 fish. How beautiful it'll be, right? It's a big miracle. And what did the boy do? He just gave them to the disciple. He didn't ask questions. How on earth are you going to divide these 5 loaves and 2 fish to all these people? It's a humongous task. He doesn't do that. He simply gives what he has. And Jesus multiplies his childlike offering into a miracle that feeds a multitude of people that are far beyond his imagination. Children don't wait until they have a lot to give. They don't. You ask, they give. They give what is in their hands. They give what is in their hands. I remember me and my wife were sitting and thinking about buying a car. Okay. And we were calculating how much it would cost us, what is required and all that. And I see Zayn comes into the conversation, our little one comes into the conversation, and she asks this question. I don't know, I think she brought some coins in her hand and says, will this be sufficient, Daddy, to buy the car? And we said, I don't think that's enough, baby. She goes in, brings that piggy bank and says, what about this? Isn't this sufficient? She's not sitting there. Even if I tell her I need 110 piggy banks to make sure this transaction goes through to pay the down payment, she would still think whatever she has, if I can bring, that might help. She's not thinking who would pay the EMIs, who would pay the down payment, how long is it going to take the tenure to cover all of that. She's never thinking about it. She's thinking, this is what I have and this is what I can give. So let me bring it and give it to you. Childlike generosity invites supernatural multiplication. It's never about us. What I have is what I should give as God moves our hearts. And He is the one who blesses. There are 2 people who showed the similar childlike faith in history, and they changed the history for good. You would see St. Patrick, when he was 16 years old, he was kidnapped by pirates and he was taken to Ireland as a slave. At the age of 16, this person, St. Patrick, was captured by the pirates and he was taken to Ireland, a country far off from where he lived. He became a slave. He was isolated, terrified, and alone, and he began to pray. He later wrote saying he prayed 100 times a day. How many times do you pray every day? Once, twice, thrice, depending on where you're going, what you're eating. He prayed 100 times a day. In the fields, while tending sheep, he discovered the voice of God. His faith was simple, childlike. He had a raw trust in the God above who heard him. Years later, after escaping and returning home, God spoke to him again in a dream. Come and walk among us again. There was a dream that came to him, said, come back to Ireland and be there and preach the gospel. A boy at the age of 16, a slave, became a slave in Ireland, and he served there. He prayed every single day, probably to escape, or I don't know what he prayed, but every single day he prayed 100 times, and he goes back to his country, safe home. And there's this dream that comes to him, says, go back to Ireland, preach the gospel. And that teen, who became a young man, returned to the land of his captors to teach or preach the gospel. When he began to do that, Ireland turned from paganism to Christianity through the childlike faith that he showed them. When he began to receive God's call on his life and stepped out in faith and moved on to this country that once captured him and made him a slave, he preached gospel there, which eventually changed that entire nation. One boy who showed obedience. Amy Carmichael, a little girl who said yes in her early years of life. She was born in Northern Ireland, and she prayed the simple prayer, Lord, make me useful. Lord, make me useful. That's all she prayed. Sometimes those are powerful prayers. She didn't know what she meant, but she prayed anyway. As a teenager, she began to have this burden for poor people in the world. As a young woman, that simple childlike yes brought her to India, where she began to work among these girls who were robbed of their childhood, brought into prostitution. She began to build shelters for them. And they're still there, those shelters. It was not complex for her to sit in Ireland and think, oh, how would I save these girls? What strategy should I use? Where should I go? Where would I find these girls? What happens to me if somebody from authority or position or power tramples me? She didn't think all those. She heard a voice and she came. This is what she says. Nothing is important except that which is eternal. Nothing is important except that which is eternal. God used Amy Carmichael in extraordinary ways because she never outgrew the heart of a child that she had. Now, what Jesus was really saying in the passage when he brought this child, put that child in center among the disciples, and he said, this is how you can enter the kingdom of heaven. Or to this childlike faith, this childlike quality is what brings you into kingdom of heaven. Unless you become like children. So how do we return to that posture? How is it possible for an adult like us who thinks too much before we even say yes to Jesus? Here are some ways I would like to highlight. We complicate faith when we replace relationship with routine. If I do this, then I am right with God, and this is how God's going to bless me. But we no longer see it as a relationship. We don't want to see it as a relationship. Jesus invites us back into the simple relationship that he wants to have with all of us. We complicate faith when we try to earn what God already gave. We saw that in the communion time. All of us adults, most of the time, our default nature is performance. Performance. Children always default to trust. Trust is what they show. A child will never wonder when they wake up in the morning after they brush their teeth, they never wonder, where will my breakfast come from? What should I do in order to get breakfast? They just come, sit at the table, or wait for their parent to wake up and serve them breakfast. That's a child. They simply receive it because they are there. Grace works in the same manner. God's grace works in the same way. You don't have to do 110 things in order to receive God's grace. It's already there. He's giving you. Be like that. Be like that child. We complicate faith when we demand understanding before obedience. Children obey because they trust the one who is calling them. If you call your child will come running to you. They have no questions asked. In fact, we adults have to caution the children not to trust a stranger, because we know the perils of a child going astray or being captured or robbed. So we do that. But most of the time, children, when they listen to the voice or hear the voice of the person that they know, they just run. They run to them. If you're crossing the road, I do this often when I bring my kids home, when I go to pick them up from school, and they're walking next to me. Before we cross the road, I say, hold my hand, or I just put my hand like this, and my daughter holds my hand and walks along with me. They're not standing there asking, why is my dad's hand in 45-degree angle? Why is his left hand here? Why is it not his right hand? How dare he show me his left hand, not right, not his... All those questions don't come into their head. They are simply trusting the person that they know. They obey instantly without seeing the cars or the vehicles that come on the road. Faith works like that. Faith works like that. You don't need to see the whole map, everything around you, or the whole point of destination. Just take the next step with Jesus. We complicate faith when we treat Christianity as a system instead of a savior. There was this beautiful saying which goes like this: we major on minors. We major on minors. We argue over trivial things, that which don't necessarily have to be dealt with. We pick up fights on issues that have no reason to be fought about. What do you believe? Which denomination do you come from? Oh, your denomination is like this. This is what they do. How do you pray? How do you read your Bible? Oh, is this how you're reading? I read it like this. And then you pick a fight, an argument that goes on from there. We turn faith into a formula. Morning, I woke up, I read my Bible, then I prayed, then I worked, I came back home, I prayed. Now God is going to answer my prayer. We make it a formula for ourselves. We were dealing with, we were talking, or teaching rather, we were teaching in our Friday prayers about the prayer course, from the prayer course. First session spoke about breath prayers. Breath prayers. His name is Pete Greg, I guess. He illustrates it so beautifully. The prayer that you need to make should be so authentic. It doesn't need to be long. You don't have to explain to God what kind of situation that you're in and how difficult it is, because He knows before you even ask. And breath prayers are as long as you take a breath. How long do you take a breath? 1 second, half a second. That's how long your prayer should be. That's one of the prayers, right? So whatever you're going through, you just have to tell God, this is what I'm struggling with. Can you please help? I like what, I'm taking my child's example too much. Forgive me. My little one, we asked her to pray for somebody in our church. I think Sister Sudha, I guess, when she was ill. And she prayed. like this. She said, God, please heal Sudhanti and help me to see her happy face again. All that she prayed was, help me to see her happy face again. Now, if you and I have to tell God, I need to see somebody happy, we'll describe what happiness is to God. God, I want to see that she is well in her physical health, and then she has to be mentally stable. Then she has to have, the strength, and then she should smile. Children don't analyze what sort of chemistry that flows through in their body when they hug their parents. Is it dopamine that's going through my brain? They don't think all that. They just hug. They simply receive it. Jesus says, come to me. And it's our responsibility to go to him. Not calculate how I should go. Just go. We complicate faith when we carry what Jesus told us to cast. Imagine a child who has a toy which is broken. How many parents can associate with this? How many toys do you have broken in your house by your kid? Right? Yesterday we went to a house, and I was asking this kid, what toys do you have? And immediately the parent said this, no, don't open that bag. Why? And then later on she said, all the toys that they have are broken, and they're all kept in that bag. If the toy is broken, what does the child do? They will fidget with it for a little while, and they bring that toy to their parent and say, fix it. They have no clue what their parent has studied. Even if you're a doctor, you're a nurse, no matter what your qualification is, they bring the toy and say, fix it. That's the trust they have on their parent. They're not trying to figure things out. We adults, we try and fix everything on our own, don't we? Struggling with depression, I shouldn't talk to anyone. What will they think of me if I show my other side? I don't want them to think I'm depressed. I want to show my strong self. I should not cry, because if crying would mean that they would see me as a weak person, I shouldn't cry, no. We try and fix everything on our own. Jesus says, cast your cares on me. That's what he's calling us to, a childlike faith, that if I have a toy broken, if I have my life broken, I need to bring it to Jesus and say, fix it for me, please. That's it. We complicate faith when we turn small steps into big barriers. We say things like, I need to pray longer because this is not being answered. This situation in my life is not getting resolved. So I need to pray 1 more minute longer or 5 more minutes longer. Maybe I need to fix a time. I need to know more about this theology or whatever that is. I need to clean up first myself. I need to make sure that I don't do these things. And that's when I should come to Jesus for him to fix me. He fixes you if you go to him. That's it. When you see a child who's walking for the first time, what do the parents say? Oh, so cute. You have a lot of expressions. Is a child thinking, can I walk? Are my feet strong enough? What happens if I fall? They have no clue what is going to happen. But either ways, even if they fall, they get up again. They try. They keep walking regardless of what happens to them. They take those shaky steps in the starting phase of their life, and all the parents begin to cheer them. God does the same to you. Even in your brokenness, when you're shaking and walking, and when you wake, when your steps are shaky, that you're not able to walk upright, God is there cheering you up. And I think that's a beautiful example that Vian was standing here and he openly confessed, I fumble, and everybody began to cheer him. That's what God does to us. When you and I are shaking in our faith, we do not know what our next step looks like or what our future looks like, what is going to happen to me. God is there saying, you can do it because I gave you strength, because I can heal you, because I can lift you up out of everything that you're going through. Regardless of anything in life, all of us adults have to take those shaky steps, trusting in God. We confuse spiritual maturity with spiritual complexity. We think that my fruit should look awesome. We never think about the roots that we have. The deeper the root goes, the simpler the fruit looks. The deeper the root goes, the simpler the fruit looks. Maturity always produces simple, beautiful, and obvious fruit. If you're matured in Christ, you don't have to complicate anything. It is seen in the way you talk, in the way you act, in the way you behave around with people, in the way you carry yourself. That love, that gentleness, self-control, all of it comes out naturally. We overcomplicate church by replacing presence with programs sometimes, isn't it? We fix our schedules. Oh, I need to attend this meeting. I need to go there, go here, go to this prayer meeting, go to that revival meeting, go there and do all of that. I need to serve in these places. We almost doing that lose the presence of God in our life. We don't focus on that presence anymore. We are focused on how much God is pleased with what I do. So let me do it. Come Sunday morning, I'm coming regularly to serve. And so many times in your frustration, the first point that you make is, I served this church for so long and this is what they did to me. Because you never focused on the presence, you were focused on those meetings, on those performances. We complicate prayer by turning it into a technique. A toddler prays, like I mentioned, I want to see that beautiful smile, or I want to see that happy face again. And adults begin writing paragraph after paragraph because we need to tell God He has no clue what is going on in our life. So we have to explain everything to Him. So we write our prayers. God desires the childlike heart. The heart of it all is trust. How much do you trust God with your life? It shows in the way you rely on Him. Do you trust Him enough to put all your care, all your burden, all that you're going through on Him and say, God, I have no clue what's going to happen. I don't know how my life is going on, but I trust You. You can handle it better. So I give it to You. In closing, I'd like to give us all this invitation. All the scripture and all of church history, all that we have seen so far, they all bring home these points. The kingdom of heaven belongs to those who trust like children. The kingdom of heaven belongs to those who trust like children, who obey like children, who listen like children, who give like children, who repent like children, and who believe like children. Not childish, not naive, but childlike, the qualities they are representing. Because a childlike heart is this: open, honest, responsive, humble, they're dependent, surrendered, and quick to run into the Father's arms. That's the heart that God desires from each one of us this morning. Come, let's stand to our feet. I'd like to close in prayer. I want you to close your eyes. At least for a moment, think of this. Close your eyes and think of this. Jesus is in the middle and He's surrounded by His disciples. He pulls you in to the center of that scene. And He's telling the disciples, I want you to be like Him. I want you to be like her, which is childlike. I want you to come to that place. And Jesus says these words to the disciples, unless you turn and become like Sam, unless you turn and become like Ruth, unless you turn and become like Rajesh, or whatever your name, you can add your name there. Unless you turn and become like this person, you can never get into heaven. It doesn't belong to you.